If you are drawing all the time, why do finished illustrations feel so rare? This is my last year project folder. It's not empty, but most of it isn't finished, which raises a very uncomfortable question. Is it really because we don't actually know where to stop? If you look at a normal illustration workflow, every stage sounds perfectly optimized. But why doesn't it work? After spending months watching Chinese YouTube Bilibili, I started noticing that most of them don't really struggle with this problem, which made me think, what if finished means something completely different? In this video, I am breaking down some of the fastest Chinese workflow techniques, testing how much time they can realistically cut from a real project, and showing secret logic Chinese artists use to actually finish every drawing. A lot of artists think that finished means polishing until something looks good. But what does looks good actually mean? For some artists, a rough draft already looks good. For others, even a month on the same piece still doesn't feel safe to call it finished. But in Chinese workflows, finished or one chengdu is treated like a quality level you can control. Or simpler, this stage already did its job, just good enough to move to the next stage. But what does that actually mean in practice? If you continue, it only costs time, energy, or can even damage the overall result. Because if you don't know what finished means for a specific stage, you literally can't stop. But the real question is, how early do they decide a stage is done? The point where most time is actually lost is planning. Either you don't plan at all, you just start drawing, which feels fast, but later you keep changing things because nothing ever really feels finished. Or you, like me, overplan, trying to predict every possible future problem, but easily burn hours or days without drawing. And neither of those actually guarantees you'll finish. While studying Chinese workflows, I realized their finish line happens much earlier than I expected. On Bilibili, I found a very simple 4-part planning structure that completely changed how stable the next stage will be, simple enough that you can apply it immediately. I built this system inside Milanote, a visual board for planning creative work, because it makes it really easy to keep references, notes and idea structure in one place while thinking. The first question is, who are you drawing? This can be anyone, any character, any number. In my case, it was Columbina. The second one is where. Where is this character? I picked Silver Moon Hall because I know if I pick something too complex, I'll burn time on background rendering. This is one way to control the amount of work. The third one is what are they doing? Standing, sitting, sleeping, etc. In my case, I thought between sitting or laying down. So far, all of this sounds pretty common, but yeah, the but. Fourth part is what makes this system actually interesting. The one unexpected detail that changed meaning of how the whole scene feels. Look at this, just a girl sitting on a railing, but heavy winds adds a bit of tension. Or here, someone hiding looking sad, but then a friend finds her and leans over from above. Or here, she's taking a photo in a space laundry room, but laying in a wheeled car. And at this point, the foundation for one chengdu is set. Less than a minute to decide and it completely changed how clear the next stage will. Like reference search. Instead of typing random broad queries and scrolling forever, every search becomes extremely targeted, which removes more than 80% of random searching. With Milanote Web Clipper, it's much easier to grab all the references at once that directly support the idea and place them on the board. Usually 1 or 2 images per question is enough. It's easy to think planning ends once you know what you are drawing, but Chinese artists don't stop there. They solve most visuals problem before they start drawing. Think about this. When you draw line art or rendering, you are still analyzing references the whole time. If you only do that while drawing, every attempt takes way more time, especially fixing mistakes. But if you spend just a few minutes analyzing before drawing, you start with a stable base. So what does this actually look like in one chengdu? To save time, you can draw directly over references to understand shapes, rhythm and structure, which makes the next stage much easier. You can also quickly build a working color palette where each color has a role. Accent colors, secondary colors, fill colors. That means roughly how much visual space each one takes. And the most important step is thumbnails. At this stage, I, and probably many others, often get distracted with details, spending hours drafting just just to realize that this idea didn't work as expected. Instead of that, most Chinese artists I watch spend less than a minute on thumbnails, and that's only possible with limitations. You simplify what you are trying to show and how. The fewer things you can control at once, the more creative your visual decisions become. So I use Milanote with limited brush size and no opacity control that naturally keeps the focus on shapes, compositions and hierarchy. You literally can't add much detail here. Give this stage 5 minutes and it makes the rest of the process much more predictable. And finally, Milanote is available for free with no time limit, so sign up for a free Milanote account using the link in the description. But this doesn't stop at drafting. The same principle applies to later stage. For example, in my workflow, line art is finished when the large and medium shapes are clean and readable. This is the key to one Chengdu. Any extra details just make everything much more complicated. But it's not the same for rendering. In many Chinese workflows, rendering feels pointless if it's not consistent. One Chengdu isn't about how good your best part is, because the viewer notices the gap in quality much faster than the quality itself. So how do Chinese artists avoid this trap? They use average rendering technique that works in almost any style. To make that approach accessible, I created the free Adapt Kit. It's a practical guide that shows you how to break down any style step by step. If you want to simplify your own learning process, grab it for free in the description. So how does average rendering actually work? Instead of fully rendering only where you care the most, you first build a base where everything is at roughly the same level of detail. If two-tone shading, reflections or more complex lighting is used on one part, the same step must exist on other part, even if those areas feel unimportant. Yeah, it might look a bit simple, a bit average, and that's exactly the point. It works perfectly with one important rule. The faster you get to pre-final art, the more likely you are to actually finish it. That's just the foundation for the real finish. After that, they use add and subtract technique. Now you can go back to the most important parts and slightly increase details, like interface, hair, add patterns on clothes, add sharp lighting highlights, or you can just use photo texture libraries to quickly increase perceived detail. That was the add part, but what about subtract? If your focal point still doesn't read clearly enough, instead of adding more detail, try removing them from less important areas. Rather than blurring everything, try to simplify the closest near the edges, or clean up messy shadow areas into simple shapes. This contrast between a consistent base and a detailed focal area creates a much stronger finished feeling, and that's usually enough to stop making this stage much faster and far more predictable. It doesn't mean you need to stop. You can push it even further if you keep those contrasts consistent. That's what one Chengdu is. But if getting to pre-final art quickly is still difficult for you, I break down one of the most predictable post-processing workflows in the next video.